My daughter-in-law stopped me in the driveway of the house I'd helped pay for and told me I wasn't welcome at the party inside. "It's more of a couples thing, Nell," Tamsin said, her smile the kind that takes years to perfect. "Having parents here would just change the vibe." My son stood 4 steps behind her in the open doorway, hands shoved into his pockets, not quite meeting my eyes. Through the wide windows, my late husband and I had stood at on our very first visit, before I co-signed the mortgage, before I wired the $140,000. I could see at least 30 people holding wine glasses, laughing at something I couldn't hear. I said, "Of course, I understand," and I drove 2 hours back to New Jersey. What neither of them had bothered to mention, what I suspect they had simply stopped thinking about, was that my name was still on the deed. My name is Nell Briggs. I'm 64 years old, a widow, and for 31 years I owned and operated 3 flower shops in Morris County. My husband Dennis built the delivery side. I ran the arrangements and the customer relationships. When Dennis passed 4 years ago from a cardiac event on an ordinary Tuesday morning, I kept the shops going for another 1.5 years before I decided that every time I walked into the back workroom and smelled eucalyptus, I was going to spend the first 10 minutes crying. I sold all 3 locations to a regional chain for just over $1 million after taxes and fees. I kept the house, the car, and the memories. Dennis had always insisted I'd be fine. Some days I believed him. Most days I had enough to keep going, which I've come to think is the same thing. Our son Beckett was 43 when his father died. He'd been in pharmaceutical sales for 15 years, which sounds stable until you understand that pharma reps are among the most restructured people in American business. He'd been let go 3 times since 2010. Each time, Dennis and I helped bridge the gap. That was what we did, what we'd always done. Beckett was a good man, genuinely funny, the kind of person who remembered your birthday and your coffee order and the name of your dog. The problem wasn't Beckett. The problem, I've come to understand, was that 30 years of being caught had kept him from learning to land on his own. His wife Tamsin was something different. She'd married Beckett 8 years ago. She was beautiful in the particular way that photographs well and doesn't fully translate in person, and she'd tried a number of things over the years. Real estate, personal training, a line of bath products that lasted about 4 months before settling into what she called being a home and lifestyle content creator. She had an Instagram called Lakeview Life with around 22,000 followers. When Beckett and Tamsin first mentioned the property in Litchfield County, Lakeview, wide plank floors, a wrap-around porch Dennis would have loved, I understood what that account was going to be used for. They came to see me on a Saturday in early October, about 18 months ago. Beckett called ahead, which he rarely did, which told me something before they arrived. I made chicken salad sandwiches because it was his favorite, and Tamsin moved hers slightly to the way she always did and talked around it. "There's this property," Beckett said, leaning his elbows on my kitchen table the way he had since he was 12. 3 acres, private dock, 4 bedrooms. The bones are incredible, Mom. "How much?" I asked. Tamsin answered before he could. "Just under 600. We've been pre-approved, but the down payment is the piece we're working through. With the market the way it is right now." "How much are you short?" I said. Beckett looked at the table. 140. I thought about Dennis. I thought about how he used to say the most dangerous money you can give someone is money they didn't earn because it teaches them to wait for more of the same. Then I thought about how Dennis was gone, and Beckett was my only child, and the silence in my house some evenings was something I hadn't found a name for yet. "I'll need to be on the mortgage," I said. "Not as a gift, as a co-borrower, my name on the deed." Something moved across Tamsin's face. Brief, calculating, quickly covered. "Of course," she said. "That makes complete sense." I signed everything in November. I wired the money. The closing went smoothly. I drove up the following weekend to see the house with the keys in the door, and a mug of coffee on the porch railing, and, looking at the way November light came off the water, I felt something close to peace. Dennis would have stood exactly where I was standing and been happy. I told myself I was building something for all of us. The renovation requests started in December. Beckett sent photos. The kitchen needed new countertops, the master bath was dated. One of the upstairs bedrooms had water damage behind the drywall they'd only found after moving in. He'd found a contractor, Tamsin's cousin Boyd, who could handle everything at a fair price. Could I cover materials and labor, just until they got their footing? I said yes to the kitchen, then the bathroom, then the water damage, which turned out to be more extensive than Boyd's first estimate. Over the following 8 months, I transferred another $34,000 into their joint account for renovation costs. I asked for itemized receipts eventually, and by the time I received them, I'd already paid. I told myself that was how family worked. What I didn't know, what I found out later, sitting across from my attorney friend Leora with a cup of coffee going cold, was that Tamsin had been running paid sponsorship partnerships with 3 home goods brands throughout the entire renovation. A flooring company paid her $4,000. A lighting brand paid her $2,500. She accepted payment from those brands to feature their products. She also accepted money from me to purchase and install them. I funded the content. She collected twice. Nobody mentioned this to me. There were signs. When I suggested driving up to see the renovation progress, Tamsin said she'd rather wait until it was finished. The mess would break your heart, Nell. When I asked about helping select the kitchen fixtures, she said they had a local designer handling the vision board. When I offered to bring some potted ferns from my porch, propagated from a cutting of Dennis's favorite plant, she said the aesthetic was going in a more streamlined direction. I noticed all of it. I said nothing, because I was afraid of what saying something might cost me. The housewarming was scheduled for the 3rd Saturday in May. I found out about it through Beckett's Instagram, where Tamsin had posted a story. White peonies in a vase, the caption reading, "Big day coming. Lakeview Life launches Saturday." She had not called me. I called Beckett and he said, "Easy as anything. Oh yeah, of course come, Mom. Come around 2. I drove up on Saturday morning with a potted hydrangea from my back garden, because I didn't know what else to bring to a party at a house I co-owned. 2 hours with the windows down, a little country radio, the same route Dennis and I used to take up to visit his sister in Hartford. I pulled into the gravel drive at 1:50. There were cars lined along the property edge, a catering van near the back gate, someone stringing lights in the oak trees. The porch looked like a photograph. The kitchen pendants I'd paid for caught the afternoon light through the windows. Tamsin came out before I'd finished parking. White linen dress. A clipboard, which I didn't understand until I realized she was probably documenting for content. Nell. My name, said the way people say it when they were hoping for someone else. Tamsin. I held out the hydrangea. She looked at it the way you look at something you have to find a polite place for. Oh, that's sweet. She set it on the stone wall by the steps. Listen, I have to be honest with you. This is more of a friends event, a social thing, for the blog launch, the brand relationships. It doesn't really work with. She gestured at me in a way that was meant to be vague and wasn't parents. You know how it is. I looked past her shoulder. My son stood in the doorway, just stood there. Beckett, I said. He came down 3 steps, not all the way. We'll have you up next weekend, Mom, just the 3 of us. A real dinner. 30 people visible through the windows Dennis and I had loved. A caterer refilling a tray of something. Someone's laugh loud enough to carry through the glass. Of course, sweetheart, I said. I picked the hydrangea up from the stone wall. I was not leaving it there, and I put it back in my car. I drove home. I didn't cry until I was past the state line, and then I did for about 20 minutes, and then I stopped. Dennis always said I was a fast crier. In and out. I used to take that as a compliment. I've known Leora Hatch since 2009, when we met at a women's business networking lunch and discovered we had the same opinion about the keynote speaker and the same preference for the shrimp over the chicken. She'd been a real estate attorney for 30 years. When I called her that Saturday evening, she said, "Tell me everything." And she listened the way good attorneys and good friends both do, without interrupting, without reassuring, just taking it in. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Send me everything. Mortgage docs, deed, every transfer confirmation, every renovation invoice you have copies of. Leora, I don't want to turn this into a legal fight if—" "Nell," she said, not unkindly, "you're already in a legal situation. You just don't know the terms yet." She called me on Wednesday. I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and wrote down what she said. I was on the deed. I had a legal ownership interest in the property. They could not sell it, refinance it, or encumber it further without my signature. That was the first thing. The renovation invoices. Leora had a contractor she trusted review Boyd's quotes. The kitchen countertop markup alone was 40% above standard Litchfield County pricing. The bathroom fixtures, similar. Across all 8 invoices, I had been overcharged by approximately $14,000. And then Lakeview Life. Tamsin had active sponsorship disclosures. Small, at the bottom of posts, the way people put them when they hope you won't look. On 4 renovation features: the flooring, the cabinet hardware, the pendant lights above the kitchen island I'd written a check for in February. 3 brands had paid her a total of just over $8,000 to feature products I had purchased. The same products paid for twice. Yeah, neither payment had come from Tamsin. I set down my pen and looked at the window above my kitchen sink for a long time. 3 days after the housewarming, I received a text from Tamsin. I've thought about whether to repeat it here, and I've decided to, because it was the sentence that finally clarified something I'd been trying not to see clearly. She wrote, "Nell, I want to be upfront because I think honesty matters. You're Beckett's mom and we love you, but you're not really part of our social world. It's not a judgment. It's just different. We'll always make sure you're included in the family stuff. The family stuff. A Thanksgiving if it wasn't inconvenient. A Christmas morning hour before they had somewhere else to be. Not their social world, their financial infrastructure, their mortgage cosigner, their renovation fund, their down payment. That was my category, and Tamsin had said it plainly enough that I couldn't soften it anymore. I called Leora and told her to draft the letter. It went out on a Friday. By Sunday morning, Beckett had called 11 times. I let them all go to voicemail. On Monday, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and listened to them in order. His voice on the first messages was controlled, almost formal, like someone who'd rehearsed. By message 5, he was angry. By 9, something had cracked open in it. The 11th was just, "Mom, please." I called him back Tuesday and told him to come Wednesday morning, not Tamsin, just him. He arrived looking like he hadn't slept in several days. He was wearing the same jacket he'd worn to his father's funeral, which I don't think he noticed, and I chose not to mention. I didn't make sandwiches. I put 2 mugs of coffee on the table and sat down. "I'm going to say some things," I told him. "I need you to let me finish." He nodded. "Your wife's cousin overcharged me $14,000. Your wife took brand payments for products I purchased, without telling me. You both turned me away from a house I co-own. And 3 days later, Tamsin texted me to explain that I'm not part of your social world. I kept my voice level. I had practiced. Tell me which part of that I'm misunderstanding." Beckett's jaw worked. He looked at his coffee. "Boyd's quotes," he started. "Leora has comparable quotes from 3 licensed contractors in the county. Would you like to see them?" He stopped. "The Instagram was paid for with my money." He stopped again. What I watched cross my son's face in that moment was something I recognized from 30 years of marriage. The expression of a person who has run out of explanations and knows it, and is deciding whether to be angry about that or ashamed. Beckett chose ashamed. That told me something. "I've been so tired, Mom," he said finally. His voice came out smaller than I expected. "I've been tired for longer than I knew how to say." I looked at him. "How long have you been out of work?" The pause told me before the answer did. 7 months, he said, October, right after we closed. Right after I wired the money. Right after I signed the deed. "Did you want to tell me?" He didn't answer that. The silence was its own answer. My son had lost his job the month we closed on a house neither of them could actually afford. Instead of telling me, they'd kept asking for renovation funds, built an influencer brand on products I was paying for, and thrown a party celebrating a life that was entirely on credit. My credit, my name, my savings. When I showed up in the driveway, I was an inconvenience. I was the person who knew too much simply by existing. I thought about Dennis. I already knew what he'd say. Here is what I told Beckett. I would continue paying the mortgage, not for their sake, but because my name was on it and I wasn't going to damage my own credit for anyone. That, and only that. The renovation overcharges. I wanted repayment. Leora was prepared to pursue it formally. Boyd's pricing was indefensible on paper. Tamsin's documented brand income during the renovation period was on the record. No more informal transfers. Not for utilities, not for groceries, not for just this month. Nothing undocumented, nothing off the books. If the house needed to be sold because they couldn't carry it, we would sell it together, properly, and I would receive my proportional share as co-owner of record. Mom, I'm not finished. I waited until he was still. I love you. I have loved you since before you were born, and I will love you until I can't anymore. But loving you does not mean letting you treat me like a checking account with a pulse. Your wife texted me to explain I'm not part of your social world. She's right that I'm not a social convenience to be included or excluded based on what you need from me that week. I am your mother, and I expect to be treated like one. Beckett put his face in his hands. We talked for another hour, haltingly, with silences, the way you talk when you're trying to be honest, and neither of you has much practice. He was scared, genuinely scared, had been since October, and Tamsin's solution had been to construct something beautiful enough that the fear couldn't get through the walls. He understood, now, what that had cost. Leora handled everything after that. The formal co-ownership notice, the renovation cost reconciliation demand, the documentation of the sponsorship revenue. Beckett and Tamsin retained their own attorney. It took 4 months. They agreed to a repayment plan for $11,000, less than Leora had originally calculated. But structured, signed, and real, nothing between us would be informal again. They did not sell the house. Beckett found a new position in January, smaller company, lower title, but steady work. Tamsin's blog continued. She no longer featured products I'd paid for, because there were no longer products I'd paid for. I don't know what she tells her followers about the renovation story now. I stopped looking. What I did instead was start volunteering at the Morris County Botanical Garden 3 mornings a week. I'd spent 30 years surrounded by cut flowers and discovered I had missed the living kind, the ones that grew toward things rather than being arranged. I learned to propagate dahlias from tubers. I talked to people who knew things I didn't. A retired landscape architect named Cal, widowed 2 years before me, started appearing near the dahlia beds on Tuesday and Thursday mornings in a way that was not accidental. And one Thursday he asked if I'd like to walk through the conservatory. I said yes. We've walked through it 4 times since. I'm not in a hurry about anything anymore. Unhurried is its own kind of wealth. My son called in March, not to ask for anything, just to call. It was short, a little awkward, the kind of awkward that is actually progress between 2 people trying to build something new out of what was broken. He asked about the garden. I told him about the dahlias, And he laughed at something I said, and for a moment he sounded exactly like his father. In April, I received a card in the mail. Beckett's handwriting on the envelope, a botanical illustration on the front. He'd thought about it, I could tell. Inside, "Mom, I've been trying to write this for a while, and I keep making it too long. So here's the short version. I saw you as someone who would always be there, so I stopped thinking about whether you were okay. That's not love. I know that now. I'm working on being better. I don't expect you to wait around for me to figure it out, but I hope you don't close the door entirely. I love you. Beckett." I read it twice. Then I set it on the windowsill, above the kitchen sink, where I can see it when I'm doing the dishes. The hydrangea I brought to the housewarming and brought back home is on my porch now. It bloomed this spring. Those big round clusters of blue, the specific shade that only hydrangeas get exactly right. Dennis had 3 of them along the back fence. I take my coffee out there some mornings and just sit with it, and I let myself have the full feeling of being exactly where I am supposed to be, belonging to myself, owing nothing to anyone's expectations of what I should quietly accept. I haven't written back to Beckett yet. I'm going to. I just want to take my time with it, because I've learned, at 64, that the things worth saying are worth saying carefully. And I have all the time I need. That, too, turns out to be something worth protecting.